Hey everyone, welcome back. This is episode 10 of Pod TC, our October version. It's nice and fall-like here in Ohio at this point. Lots of leaves are changing. The weather is starting to get crappy, but I see pumpkin spice and pumpkins and all the fun decorations and stuff. So it's a fun time to be here. But today I have a very special guest, my buddy Lindsay Lake Hawkins. She is the Director of Outreach and Engagement at Ohio University. How are you doing today, Lindsay?
Great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for asking. Lindsay and I were talking the one day, and we thought it would be a cool episode, especially it's 2023. Here, kind of in enrollment management, we're kind of used to people working from a distance and regional recruiters, and just a lot of our job happens on the road, even if we are based at our offices full time, kind of like I am. But there again, it's 2023. A lot of us have work from home flexibility. Some of us live at a distance, so we thought it'd be really cool to talk to someone from kind of that world, and someone who literally supervises and leads and does all those things with some staff that are all over the place. So Lindsay is kind of perfect for this conversation. We haven't had anyone on from OU yet either, so I know that she was feeling some diss on that, so I wanted to make sure that we had that covered. So question one, though, Lindsay, I always ask, could you tell me a little bit about yourself, at least for the audience, just kind of maybe where you went to college and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, as you mentioned, I'm Lindsay Lake Hawkins, and I currently serve as the Director of Outreach and Engagement at Ohio University. So, my background, I've been in admissions for 15 years, which is hard to believe. Started straight out of undergrad. I graduated from Otterbein University way back in 2008 with my undergrad. And actually, while I was there, I had an internship in the admissions office during my senior year as an admission counselor during the fall. So I was able to kind of see what that life was like and then go back to being a student for 2 more quarters, which was really nice.
Yeah.
It made me appreciate my student schedule a lot. So that kind of gave me a taste of it, and that is what led me into the admissions world, much like I think a lot of other professionals who are in this field, having that experience in the admissions office as a student. So straight out of undergrad, I went to work for Ohio University on the main campus in Athens. So I lived and worked there. I was in the office serving as an admission advisor full time. So that was a lot of fun. And while I was there, I earned my master's degree, or I started it. And then I went back to Otterbein, my alma mater, because there was a position that opened up. And I was able to get back to Columbus and get back to my alma mater. And while I was there, I was able to finish my graduate degree. And then I worked there for 7 years and came back to OU back in 2018. And I've been with Ohio University since. I've had a couple different roles with the university since coming back. So I started out coming back and working as a community partnerships manager, which is what kind of launched me into the transfer world, which was really nice. And then I moved into the work that I'm doing now, where I work with transfer as well as first year and our remote recruiters, so our regional recruitment managers. I live and work in Columbus, so I'm fully remote. I was remote before the pandemic, and I'll continue to be remote with the team that I supervise. And I have a husband and a son who is 2 years old, and a dog who is very ornery sometimes. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah. Remote before it was cool. That was a very cool statement that you almost made right there. But that's a great sense of your background and such. And it's always funny to hear also, like, you were on quarters back in the day, not to get on you, because that was like right before the switch, really. But it's a cool combination of things that you were doing and kind of the different backgrounds that you've had and how you've moved into transfer and stuff. So I guess usually my follow-up question is how you got involved with transfer students. Was that kind of was it something that you really wanted to, and the opportunity came up, or was it something that you kind of worked with transfer students in the past and then this position came available? Because I want to say that you're the only person on your team that's I know that people do both, but you're the only person that's straight up transfer, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I think, like many people, when I was solely recruiting on the first year side of things, I did that for 10 years.
Yeah.
I was a little bit anxious about recruiting transfer students because, you know, they're
Yeah.
different. They're a different world. Everybody has an individual background and story. So sometimes it can be, you know, an exciting challenge to work with a transfer student. Sometimes it can be really straightforward. So when I was presented with the opportunity of a job that opened up with Ohio University in 2018 as a community partnerships manager, it was working with community colleges. So Columbus State Community College and Marion Tech were the two schools that I worked with in that role, and sort of being that go-to person not only for the students but also for the partnership that we had. So it allowed me to experience new things professionally, and that was something that really attracted me to the role and doing that because, like I said, I had been in admissions for 10 years at that point. I did first year recruitment. I was ready to get off the road as far as traveling goes as much. And so it was more of a local recruitment territory, which I had never really had. And it was the opportunity to work with transfer students and get to know the community college system a little bit better because I really hadn't had any experience with that. And so it opened up a lot of things for me professionally. And then, yeah, like you said, currently I work, my primary quote unquote territory is with Columbus State. And so I work with transfer students, but through my team, I work, you know, with first year students and I still interact with the first year students and things like that. So it's nice to kind of have a foot in both worlds.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and I mean, so like when you first got in there, you were doing Columbus State and Marion. Do you still do Marion too, or you just do Columbus State now?
I don't. So
Interesting.
I just work with Columbus State students as my territory now, which is really nice. I was glad that I was able to hang on to that.
Yeah, that is cool. That's the only place I ever see you. So I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, sweet. So that kind of tees up what we were, thinking about covering today. So like I was kind of preluding earlier, of course, especially, 2023 beyond the pandemic. Well, if we're beyond the pandemic, who knows? But you know what I mean? Ever since the pandemic broke out, kind of, I think we've all been feeling it to some regard. In the early days, we felt very maybe isolated because we couldn't interact with anyone. But I think a lot of positions have shifted over the years. Maybe they're not fully remote, maybe they're half remote or a little bit remote. And then, like I said, there's some positions that just your team's out of the office or whatever on the road all the time. So could you kind of tee up, before we dive into some of the other stuff, just how is your team set up and where are they all located kind of in comparison to you?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So, my team, I oversee our regional recruitment managers. And with our office, the way that we recruit is we have not only first year students that we recruit, but also transfers as part of our territory.
Right.
And so we have that combined effort, but the main focus of our regional recruitment managers and our recruiters that are campus based is first year just because it's our largest population. So that's the main focus, but we do some strategic things with transfer with the whole recruitment staff. So with my team specifically, they are located throughout Ohio and across the country. So we have two regional recruitment managers based in Ohio with me as well, one in Cleveland and Cincinnati. And then we have a couple on the East Coast in the Mid-Atlantic area, the Carolinas, and then in the Southeastern United States around the Atlanta area. We have a recruiter who's based in Dallas, and then one that is in the Denver area, in the Chicagoland area, and then the Southern LA area. So like Southern California, basically, LA, San Diego. So we're spread out. We are spread across 3 different time zones, which can be tricky sometimes when it comes to meetings, but it's been a really fun challenge, I think, to oversee a team that is regionally based because there are so many differences when it comes to recruiting in the different regions of the United States. Students face different issues and challenges depending on where they're located, and it could be totally different from what we're experiencing in Ohio. So it just kind of opens you up to that national conversation, which has been A lot of fun to explore, a fun challenge, I would say, to explore and just kind of get to know the regions a little bit better as well. While I had done limited travel in a few of those regions, I had never traveled extensively, so I've gotten to learn a lot more about those areas through my team as well.
Well, and that's so do you ever see so I mean Cleveland and Cincinnati to Athens isn't a stretch, of course, but I mean I would go on a limb and say you probably never really see some of the recruiters that are really far away on campus ever. Like, do you ever have any in-person interaction that you can kind of build off of, or is it just 100% a fully online relationship?
Yeah, great question. So I like to say that I quote unquote see my team at least biweekly through we do teams meetings. So
Hmm.
we usually will have camera on so that we can see one another and kind of have that face-to-face interaction, even if it's not an in-person interaction. So I
Sure.
think that that helps to sort of build that rapport. And it's always nice to see someone, quote
I
unquote, in
agree.
person.
Yeah.
And with my team, they are fully remote as well. So their positions are fully remote, but they travel. So they will also travel back to campus.
Hmm.
Our goal is to have the team travel to campus. Um, Usually quarterly is what we shoot for. So,
Okay.
like once during the fall semester, spring semester, and then during the summer. We've been lucky enough over the past couple years to hit that goal. And this year we did a big summer training in June, and my entire team was there, which was the first time that it had ever happened, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was so nice to just kind of see everyone in person, hang out in person, and realize that some people were maybe taller than you expected or shorter than you expected because
That's
you
my
always see
favorite.
them, yeah,
That's my
on the screen.
favorite part. Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say that with the remote positions, one of the things that I've noticed, since I was remote before the pandemic and then worked through the pandemic remote and now sort of post pandemic in a remote world too, is that communication has gotten a lot better, I think, with the connection to campus, feeling like you are able to connect with the team members who are located on campus. So I know that like my regional team, they feel connected to our team on campus because they'll do video calls with them and we have meetings all together and things like that. So we try to maintain those connections. And then also when we get together in person, they all have a lot of fun because it's like they see each other, virtually, and then they get to hang out in person too, which is always nice.
Right. That is cool. And that's probably a good tie into to the next question, kind of. So there's you had the opportunity to meet in person, and I know that you guys do like the bi-weekly meetings on camera and stuff, but what do you do specifically for like your relationship with your people, like having a good relationship with like let's parse out like the employees liking one another or like being professional with one another.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you do specifically as a supervisor to kind of like maintain and build on those relationships, just one-on-one or you and the group?
So I think our meetings are a big thing, just having those regular check-in meetings, and making sure to not just make it all about business the whole time. So
Hmm.
I try really hard to make sure that, when I'm messaging someone or talking to someone, that I ask how their day is going. I think something small like that
Yeah.
can kind of set the tone. So, sometimes I'll get straight to business, but usually I like to kind of just like see, how's your day going? Like, how are things? How's travel going?
Sure.
How's life? Whatever you want to share with me, that kind of thing. Um, so I think that being open to hearing what the team wants to share, and not pushing it, of course, is something that I would hope that they would point to as makes them feel comfortable, chatting with me and feel like they're connected with me. Um, and then we try, so I know that this is sort of separate from my team, but as a recruitment team as a whole, so just my team, which is the regional recruitment managers who are based across um, the United States, and then we also have our regional campuses where we have recruiters who are based there, and then we have our on-campus staff of recruiters who are in Athens. We have a weekly meeting where all of us come together virtually, of course, through a Teams meeting. But we come together and we not only do, the things that you would expect in a quote unquote staff meeting, but we would, we get updates and things like that. But a while ago, I started a segment called, it didn't have a name for a while, but we kind of we kind of stole from, I guess, the Today Show, I think, but we started a segment called Tell Me Something Good, where at the end of the meeting, we end it with like, tell us something good about like what happened, either personally or professionally. And so I think that that is a really great way for my team to share what they're doing on the road and share those wins that they have, but also share the wins that others have who are on campus that could, look different from the work that they're doing, to just kind of, let one another see the work that you're doing and that it's making a difference and recognizing that work that's happening too. So that's been something I think that's been fun, that we've done. And then with my team, we do a monthly meeting, because I think it's really important for them to be able to connect with one another. So they do a weekly meeting with just the recruiters from my team. And so it allows them to, talk about maybe the things that they're doing in their areas, if there are any issues that they're facing, like troubleshooting that, or spitballing ideas with one another. So it allows them to be able to have the space to be creative without feeling like I'm hovering, I guess, as a supervisor. So we do those individual check-ins, and then we have a monthly team meeting that I lead that's a little bit more, I would say, business oriented, as opposed to those weekly meetings that they have that can, center around recruitment things, of course, but then also just kind of centering around things that are happening in their areas.
It's a nice like combo. I think like kind of, and I to steal a term from a movie from when I was in high school, like when you watch Zombieland, like the double tap, like you never want to do things just one way. Yeah, I know it's such a bad example, but you don't want to do things one way. A lot of times to like solidify something, it's like when you're back in school, like you're supposed to do it a couple of different types of ways, kind of locks into your brain. And maybe for relationship building, like sure, it's nice to get a nice message from your boss, but then also having them check in, even if it's like one-on-one or in a larger group. And the segment of like, I forget what you called it, but like the wins segment, small wins or whatever you were saying about the Today Show. How long did it go without having a name, I guess?
Oh gosh, I felt like I wasn't creative enough, and it kept going over in my mind, like, tell me something good, because I knew I had heard it before. But then someone covered a meeting for me and they were like, we're just going to call it Tell Me Something Good. And I came back and I'm like, okay, that's
That's
off
what
my
it's called.
shoulders. That's
That's pretty fun.
But I think it was like a month before it had a name. I was like,
That's
we're
good.
going to do this and this is going to be our segment and I'll come up with a name. So yeah.
It's very show tuney, but yeah, I mean, it's nice to hear that you're not trying to just kind of hit it from one angle, and people are complex and different, and what might work for them might be more of an individual stance, and some people thrive more in a group setting and all of that. So that's really nice that you're at least you're putting in conscious effort. And I have to imagine that sometimes like you have a good group and sometimes they gel, and that might be something that's a bit out of your control, but just being very conscious about not making them, but like asking them to do certain things and doing, more or less like we work in higher ed, so we're allowed to be a little corny with stuff, So I think that those win segments and things like that are really nice. And I was going to ask you more or less like what you do to get them to have good rapport with one another, and that's coming up next. And I know that you kind of shared before, like I actually think that that's a stellar idea to have them meet or like talk with one another without having their quote unquote boss hovering or whatever you had said. So is that kind of like the largest thing that you do to have them like kind of build good rapport or good relationships with one another, or is there kind of like a dual or trifold approach? Like, could you explain more on that?
Yeah, so I'd say that that's the biggest thing that I do to encourage building relationships with one another on my team specifically. I think another thing that happens naturally is just, there are some people who have a lot of knowledge in certain areas. And so I will, as opposed to, I guess, like feeling like they have to rely on me for all of the answers, I'll encourage them, like, this person has a lot of knowledge in this area. You could, have a conversation with them, schedule a meeting, like, that kind of thing. So I like to empower my team. to feel like they have my support, but that they can also, talk to one another and lean on each other. And I think that that helps in, or at least I hope that it helps in building that trust between them and feeling like they really do have, friends on the team that they can go to. Because I think that when you're in person, you naturally make those connections and you might have friends in the office, you have your friends slash coworkers. And so when you're remote, it's a little bit harder to do that. But I think that it can happen naturally if, you encourage those connections in different ways, encouraging them to, set up meetings if this person does a really great job of putting together, a travel schedule, or they do a really wonderful job of connecting with counselors in their area. And so what does that conversation usually look like? So really encouraging them to connect with one another.
Yeah.
I also, just my style personally, I try to make sure that if someone accomplishes something, I recognize it, but I also try to ask them how they want to be recognized. So some people like to be publicly recognized, some like that individual recognition. So I think that can be an important question to ask. And then also just making sure to give credit where credit is due. And I think that, my team does that too. They are really great about supporting one another and giving shout outs to one another as well, which is always encouraging. So I love it when the team give each other shout outs.
Yeah. Well, that's nice and recognized. I think recognition is a large component of even in person or online. I mean, it's probably easier in person. I think that's kind of the theme of today is that, some of these things are easier in person just because you're right. Like when you have an issue, like you just walk over to someone's office, you knock on the door if the door is open, and it's a bit more like, is their green bubble on Teams actually a green bubble, or are they right in the middle of something and you shoot them a message, but they could be, right in the middle of doing something deep and they could be at a, event or meeting, whatever. But for you to, make a conscious effort again, like another theme, conscious efforts as a supervisor to shout out people, to have them talk to one another and kind of build up those relationships. And I feel like kind of the longer that people are together, the more they're gonna, the bridge, once the bridge is built, like people can kind of cross over and it's an easy thing to keep going with. So I think that that's probably working to your advantage a little bit, but also when you bring on like a new team member, just to make sure that you get to know them, like you were saying, and kind of their not quirks, but like you prefer this in this scenario, and then following up. So that's really nice. You had said a little bit about like how you guys try to get like your regional people to campus every once in a while, at the very least, like a few times a year. Because one of the big things, especially in higher ed, is like, we have like college spirit and stuff for the places that we work, obviously. And when you're in your very specific case, not everyone in transfer obviously works for recruiting, but when you're in recruiting, to have like that school spirit and connection to campus and such, like that's pretty important because you're trying to tell high schoolers or college students or whoever about your campus. So I guess it's a twofold question. How do you do anything specifically to kind of like keep up that connection to campus? And then I guess the second part, and they might be alums, so that might help out a lot. Is your whole team, were they repping the Bobcat from the beginning, or were they, like recruiting somewhere else and then they ended up, coming across the position that they're in now?
Yeah, that is always a fun question is, did you go to school there? So with my team, it is a mixture. I have a few who are
Okay.
alum, but I would say, but the majority of my team are not alumni.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
and so, and while I did my master's at Ohio University, I didn't do
Sure.
my undergrad there. So I also, come from that world of learning how to represent an institution that you didn't attend as an undergrad.
Right.
And so I think that I'm hopeful that that helps my team because I can give sort of that perspective from my background in recruiting. But with Ohio University, the whole atmosphere and the alumni and just the students, they're also passionate about the institution. And I think you find that, pretty much anywhere you go. But with my team, they will run into alumni in their areas and they'll be able to, be energized in that way and talk to them and get some stories that way. when they're on campus, we try to include some component of having student interaction so that they are able to, have some student stories that they can draw on that are authentic and aren't just the things that, are put together for publications that, you're kind of reading from the view book or something like that. Um, so we try to encourage that when we come to campus, just making those connections with current students so that they can hear some of their stories, even if it's talking to a tour guide for like 5 minutes during a visit program, to just kind of get insight into, what's happening on campus, what their life is like as a student, that kind of thing. So I think that's one of the ways that we try to have those connections to campus and keep that. We also, through teams, I think that, most offices have this, there are different group chats that happen. And so, we have our entire recruitment team group chat, which is fun. So it's a nice way to, on the daily, share things with one another. And there are a lot of alumni who work on campus. And so, that's a nice way to have that connection to campus and to hear their history with campus and things like that. But I think for my team specifically, they encounter a lot of alumni at events that they go to and around their areas. And so they're able to get those stories, which I think helps them a lot with making that connection to campus.
That's cool. I think that you're conscious about a lot of things, especially when it comes to supervising and leading your team. But there's always, people are hard on themselves, or at least that might be just me. But where do you think are the areas that you can improve or improve your situation?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And it's one that I try to think about from time to time because I feel like, and I tell my team this all the time, I feel like as a supervisor, my primary role is to serve as an advocate. And so I want to make sure that I'm advocating as best as possible for my team and that I'm listening and asking the right questions. And so I think that there can always be constant improvement in making sure that you are actively listening and understanding what the needs are, and sometimes trying to read between the lines because we know that when you are sending a message through like an instant message or a text message or something like that, or an email, things can be perceived differently and tones aren't there and facial expressions and all of that. So I also try to make sure that I'm trying to read between the lines with that. If I know my team members or feel like I know my team members professionally, and also just think about, leading with grace. And so allowing to make sure that there are conversations where it's like, I'm having a hard time or I need help with this. How can you help me? How can you advocate for me? And so just making sure that there's that safe space or that safe feeling and encouraging that. So I think that's something that I'm constantly trying to think about and improve on is just how can I be a better advocate for my team members and make them feel comfortable talking to me and coming to me and knowing that I have their best interests at the forefront of my mind and that I'm going to do everything I can for them.
Yeah, having someone's back is always a very good feeling. So if you've built up that trust with someone, they're going to feel comfortable coming back time and time again. And when you have a supervisor who's willing to go to bat for you, I think that we all feel that, and I'm sure you felt that over the years if you've had a good supervisor and such. So maybe that's where you draw on some of that is from a former supervisor. I have no idea, but I would say I see your peeps on the road and they're all big fans of yours. So I'm assuming that you're doing something right. So
well, that's great. Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to have to ask them if I actually do an okay job with that.
yeah, well, they might just be lying to me because they know we're friends, but who knows? So we've had a pretty good conversation so far. It's kind of the end of the questions that I had, conjured up for you, but is there anything else that you would like to add that you think that I forgot?
I think that one thing I would like to add is about just kind of I think the dynamic of recruitment since we changed from having like a traditional transfer team or first year team, and now we kind of do the recruitment aspect of it together. One of the things that I found that has been really wonderful is that more people on our team are exposed to the transfer world and feel more comfortable with it. And so I know, looking back when I was just on the first year side of things for that 10 years, transfer scared me a little bit because I didn't work with transfer students every day and it wasn't something that I was totally comfortable with. And so it felt like a bit of a stretch. And now I feel like, the focus is still first year for the most part with my team and the larger team that I work with because it's the larger population. But there is, I think, more knowledge and more knowledge base and a bit less of like the scaries when it comes to transfer students with our team members now. At least I hope so. And I think that, we think a little bit more as a team about transfer as opposed to just focusing on those first year things. So that's been something that I have been pleasantly surprised by and has been really wonderful for me because when I came into the transfer world, like I said, I hadn't had a lot of experience and it was going to be something that I could learn and grow from professionally. And I have found that I just really enjoy working with transfer students. And I hope to be able to work with them for a while. And it's a fun population. And like I said, every student is unique and has a different story. And so I think it's fun when others who are used to working primarily with first year students can be opened up to that world and have a little bit more experience with that.
I agree with you. And then I think that even just to bounce off of that, so many, at least where I work, and I assume everywhere at this point, but so many first year students are kind of a blend of transfer student at this point with the amount of credits that they're coming in. So having people who are more conscious towards that population or work with transfer student, that only can benefit helping a student that comes from a community college or like Columbus State in your case that might be 18 and starting college kind of quote unquote for the first time, but you have more in your back pocket to offer them in kind of the dual fold approach. And that's why we always say here at OTC that transfer specialists or transfer people are always the smartest people we know. So I thank you so much for coming in and doing this for me, but for all of us today. I really do appreciate it. I think this is double digits. So we're up to 10 episodes now, which is, it blew by. This was just an idea almost a year ago, and now we're already kind of in double digits and almost a year in. So we'll have another episode for you guys here in November. Hopefully we'll be doing something a little bit for Nationals Transfer Student Week, which is technically coming up here very soon. But thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.